inspiring.
Hello, fellow weird and wild ones. It has been a minute. So much has evolved and changed about your lovely host, me, goddess, and Sunseed community since season 4 of the podcast. And I am stoked to share some of the dope ass folks I've met, been in community with, and have learned from along the way in season 5 of the SSC podcast. So grab your drink, get your snacky snacks, and gather your homies for the end times. End of what? I'm really not sure, but I really hope it's fascism. But I digress. Different conversation. Let's get on with the show.
You are inspiring. You are inspiring. You are inspiring. You are inspiring. You are inspiring at least 22,000 times a day. So inspiring. He's so inspiring.
Yay, Leo. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sunseed Community podcast. I'm really honored to have you on today. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio. So Leo, they, he is an anti-capitalist, financial coach, and educator. Oh, yes. Sorry. I was, listen, I am so turned around. I was like, wait, did I hit record? And literally I heard it say
It's
let me.
okay. It's okay.
I might keep this in because it's just so
Listen,
hilarious.
there's a Mercury retrograde in Leo. So I feel like I've been like, okay, slow, steady. Like
Thank you.
just let whatever like happens, just let it happen. You know, like
I am so weak. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna. Okay, let me back up. Let me back. This is totally staying in. Okay.
work.
Leo he is an anti-capitalist financial coach and educator, independent journalist, and founder of Queer and Trans Wealth. Unlike most financial professionals, they are not trained to make the rich richer. He is a worker among workers and does not abide by capitalist definitions of wealth. Yes, they are trained to help you spend and save your money in alignment with your values. Ashay. I love that bio. So Leo, how we do this podcast is we start with kind of like a check-in question to warm us up. And so the question is, who are you bringing into the space with you today?
Ooh. Who, as in like an ancestor or somebody?
It can be an ancestor, it can be folks that are still on this plane. It can be
Cool,
anything.
cool. Well, I'm gonna start with a what, because I brought my um Hello Kitty
Oh, yeah, boy. Oh,
fake
oh,
Stanley mug.
it's so cute.
It's
I
so
love.
cute. It's rhinestoned. There's some ice in here, so you probably hear it.
Wait, did you get that custom made?
No, actually, my partner got it at a first bargain, like one of those, like almost like a 99-cent store, but stuff is more like
Oh,
five bucks, you know? Like, yeah.
oh my gosh.
So it's
Wait,
my
okay.
favorite thing.
I'm loving this. Yes.
And yeah, in terms of who I'm bringing here, I've just been doing a lot of research about one of our elders who just passed. Her name is Jewel Thais Williams.
Mm,
She she ran a nightclub here in LA. It was like one of the first Black queer nightclubs, and she owned it for like 42 years.
mm,
Um, and yeah, she did a lot of incredible work. Used the profits from the nightclub to start um, a Chinese medicine clinic in the neighborhood so folks can get healthcare for free. Started a housing project for women and children affected by HIV. And yeah, just all around good people. And so I feel like I've been speaking with her a lot and also speaking with a lot of people who loved her, speaking with a lot of like nightlife folks who are inspired by her. So she's really with me today.
Mm. Well, may Miss Jewel rest with the ancestors. And it sounds like she created a whole legacy of just like love and care and joy while she was here on this plane. So I hope that that continues. I know it will.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks, Leo. I think I'm bringing into this space with me. Um, my ancestors that were like, which I think was all of them, but for a lot of the ancestors who were, like figuring out what wealth and abundance means to them and like divesting from working for other people. And like, I
Mm,
want to have my own business and what that meant. And also like my grandpa was a hunter and
mm,
like back in the day, and I think maybe still now, like that was how like our like my family like offset being poor is like by hunting. And um there's a quote, and I'm gonna, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of this elder slash ancestor. But like she talks about how like not feeling poor when it came to food because they always found what they needed on the land. um, and that quote just like really sung to me about like what we consider as poor, what do we consider as wealth? And this idea is like of like my belly was full and it was full of really good things and nourishing things, and I
mm,
kind of like hold that with me. If I can, like I'm gonna remember her name and put it in the description. But anyway, yeah, that's what I'm carrying with me.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So providing context for how we met at Funders for LGBTQ Issues 2025 Funding Forward Conference. And I think you came to sit at like the breakfast table I was at, and you were rocking like the dopest ass like one piece. Like it was everything. Was it, wait, no. Was it your like, was it two-piece print? It was,
It was
and
a
maybe the
two-piece
one
print,
piece,
I'm pretty sure.
yes. And then were you wearing a one piece some other time?
Another time I was wearing a jumpsuit. I do love a monochrome situation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So basically, iconic outfits throughout.
Thank you, thank you.
We love. So that's how the conversation got started, and I got so excited when he told me about, your passion work. Um, and yeah, so I'm excited for you to be here.
Yeah, thank
So
you for having me.
yay, yeah, you are absolutely welcome. So let's get started there. So how did queer and trans wealth come to be?
Um, yeah, it's an interesting story of how I got here for sure. Because I will say, like I went to art school in college and like was always like painting and writing and doing all these creative things. And never in my life was I like, one day I'm going to be looking at people's budgets 8 hours a day. Like never did I think that, you know? But what happened was I was hired as um, a journalist in a newsroom to cover personal finance stories. I did that for about 3 years, and I didn't. Again, like before that, I was writing about like sex toys and makeup and fashion, like so. I think like the skills that lent themselves to like that lent the skills that lent themselves to becoming, a personal finance journalist was like I know how to make people feel comfortable enough to get them to open up about like, you know, a really intimate topic such as
Mhm.
finance, right? And just get them to talk about that stuff. And I really liked that aspect of it. I just like fell in love, honestly, with the folks that I was interviewing. I got to write some stories about the um, positive effects of like access to abortion for women and folks who were able to receive them and what that did for their life and their sense of agency. I got to speak to families who were affected by anti-trans legislation and, just having to pick up and move across the country with no warning and like no savings usually and having to go into debt to be able to do those things and keep their families safe and, for them to be able to access healthcare as well, right? Um, so yeah, this is what I was doing, and this is also primarily where I got my training and how I started to understand like, oh, here's like I wrote some stories like that, and of course there were some, here's some rich guy and how he managed his millions of dollars, So like this is sort of like where I got my training and how I got to see like how like all the different approaches that people take in terms of budgeting. And when I was doing that job, I just noticed like none of the folks in the queer and trans community were really reading my work, and I was so frustrated because I was like, no, we need to know, like we need to know this stuff, and even for me, like knowing this stuff was like improving my life, so I was like, okay, let me have my own thing on Instagram so that I can begin to like share the stories that I'm writing from a queer and trans lens, right? And when I did that, I was beginning to get the response that I wanted, and I was beginning to reach the people who I really wanted to speak to, which is like folks who never got financial literacy in their lives, And so, from there, I always thought it would just be content, to be honest. I always thought I would just be making my little videos and writing my little articles, but like over and over again, I just kept getting requests like, hey, can you start coaching me? And so I got some training in that as well. And yeah, and then started off from there. I've been doing this full time for like 2 years now. So yeah, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you.
Teamwork, yes. And I love that this started with like hearing other people's stories and forming those relationships and being like, this is something that I want to like share with more people and be working on with other folks. That's awesome. Also, I used to, I was in journalism school as well. Like, that is so funny. I mean,
Yeah.
we use it, but it's not like like, I do not consider myself a journalist anymore. But I just, oh, it takes me back to journalism school. And like, I was a fashion journalist for Global Panorama, which no longer exists.
Oh,
And like,
wow.
I did a story on cafe cardies, as me and my friend call them, because it's light enough, you can just like bring with you and wear in a cafe, but you can
Yeah.
take it anywhere. So cafe cardi season.
Work.
So, oh, thank you for that blast from the past. And I love that like through line of your story. So. In your 2 year plus years of doing this, what have you encountered in your work that has challenged you to unlearn ideas you once had around wealth?
Hmm. Yeah. You know, I had this, I like knew this logically going in because, um, like this is true. Like everyone's definition of wealth is really different, right? But like only at the second year mark has it really sunk into my body, like, oh, right. Like everyone's definition of wealth is different. Like for me, for example, what I define as wealth these days is like my time and and having clear space on my calendar and having days where like absolutely no meetings. I'm just spending my days like reading and researching and writing, like or not, or just, doing my laundry and like watching TV, like vegging out. Like those are like that's kind of my marker for wealth is like how like can I set up my schedule and my finances in a way that, I only need to work so many days out of the week, right? Um, that's true for me. However, some other people are like, no, like for me, my definition of wealth is that my work reaches like, as many people as possible, and which means like them, working more hours and doing a lot more traveling and like networking and meeting
Mhm.
people, right? Some people define wealth as having not being super materialistic in a way, but just having like a home and like two
Mm-hmm.
cars and like some people do have like a more traditional definition and in my practice I've been working really hard at being like, okay, if someone's talking about their thing, that's their thing, and I can't
Mm-hmm.
be inserting what I think they need to be doing almost, because I really let folks like lead with their definition of wealth and we kind of plan around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bring up a good point though, because even in your definition of, for the longest when I thought about wealth and abundance, I thought immediately money, and what money can give you. But even in your definition, or like how you apply it with like your time and how you want to be spending your time, that actually does equate to like how like we are paid for our time.
Hmm.
Like there is this through line of like and like the most rich folks, they often a lot have more free time. Like and I think we kind of like forget that or don't like always know that of I forgot what's like the 80/20 rule or like how you like how you spend your time working should basically work for you. Like less time working, but more time for free, like
Yeah.
for yourself. But what you're saying is also like for some folks, maybe working more is like how they get to their version of wealth, which I think is
I
completely
mean,
valid too.
totally. And this is the thing though, like, goddess, there are people who make like stacks of money and they still feel like I gotta go. I gotta do my which is like cool, good for them. You know what I mean? Like I know I'm not built that way to be
Yeah,
honest, but
couldn't be
like
me, but yeah.
right, but like, it sort of depends. Like some folks, like, well, I'll be specific. Some capitalists are like, yes, money for the sake of money, right?
Hmm.
But there are folks, on the left, let's say, where it's like, yes, I do need money to live and I'm making enough money, but also like the work that I do is so important that I want, you know, as many people as possible to like know about it. I want to help as many people as possible, right? With the work that I'm doing, which is like cool. To them, that is their definition of wealth, and I love that. I think um oh man, I always feel like when I come into sessions with folks, like I'm a colossal killjoy, but like, because like to me, when I sit with my definition of wealth, as in like having my time back, I just have to make peace with the fact that I cannot help everybody. Like there is
Mm.
a physical limit to the number of people who are gonna like read my work and like use that to, help them like budget and whatever. There's a limited amount of people that I can see one-on-one or in groups or couples, like, and I have made my peace with that. Like I'm like, great. Like to me, I'm almost um like I just say thank you to the ancestors for the fact that there is a stopping point, whereas
Yeah.
sometimes when you like, especially if you work for yourself, there's this feeling of like, I need to eat like forever, like for the rest of my time on earth, and therefore I need to like do as much as I can, right? And like
Hmm.
it's a different mindset than like somebody whose definition is more like, oh, I want to help as many people as possible. Um, they then have this mindset of like, my my lifestyle like is going to be, there's a certain cap to what my lifestyle is also, right? Because they're going
Mm.
to spend their time, instead of like, let me maximize every wealth opportunity, like that's not their mindset either, right? So it's like cool, like for them the mindset is like, I'm going to have to accept and compromise that, the apartment that I live in is like, this is as big as it gets, which is like that's
Hmm.
also okay, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just different ways of looking at it. And I'm even thinking about like, you have brought in your ancestors who like didn't want to work for other folks, right? Um, I think it comes with an acceptance of like, okay, um, being self-employed is like the the number, um, the amount of like work I'm willing to put in the beginning, not just in like
Mm,
direct, sales or anything like that, but more like the networking that maybe it pays off like years later. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like being
Hmm.
willing to be more flexible about your concept of time versus like, okay, 1 hour in, $30 in. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm learning a lot. Like it's just sinking into I mean, I always knew this, but it's really just sinking in like, oh yeah, everyone's definition really is different. And also there's different compromises everyone needs to make within that definition, right?
That's a good point. Cause yeah, I think I strive to find this sweet spot between like I don't want to be a martyr, but I do want to work for something that is in alignment with my beliefs. I also don't want to be someone who is over consuming and taking more than what I need. Like where's the sweet spot? Because I do want to live well. Like
Totally. Yes.
I want a very sweet life. I want that for
Absolutely.
all of us. So I definitely hear what you're saying. And then that idea of like there are certain trade-offs because we both work for ourselves. And there are like I had to trade not had to, but I've redefined what it means to create like a schedule and like admin because by working for myself, that's something that now I have the opportunity to curate, which is a part of my practices of like, okay, if you need to if you need to do the admin task, if you need to fill out the taxes and all of those things, how can you do that in a way that aligns with how you want to be feeling in your day-to-day life and within your work. But that was a trade-off for having someone else do it while also like working for someone else's dream. And
Yeah,
I'm
right?
willing to take that trade-off at this point.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. That's a very good point. Um, a lot of the work you do is around supporting folks so like yes with budgeting and things but like how to look at their community overall as like a part of their wealth plan. So what ways of building and supporting our communities have you learned since starting this work?
Oh my God, so many things. I mean, I've learned to never underestimate when, you know, um, like when a friend has been like, Leo, I see you're going through it. Like, can I take you to lunch? Like, it's
Hmm.
so simple, but it's so powerful, you know? And it's something that I'm trying to do like um this coming Friday. July 25th for the people in the future. The, um, Diana Ross is playing at the Hollywood Bowl, and I know. And so I bought me and my partner some tickets, and I was like, let me buy one extra because I know some friends who would be like, wow, like a ticket to go see Diana Ross, it would be so fun. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
everyone's going through something right now. I mean, it's wild time. So I was like, yeah, let me just get it. And like to me, like how fun, you know?
Yes. I love this. There's something like in both examples. In one, a friend saw you having a tough time and was just like, let me take you out to lunch or let me get you lunch. And then the other one, you were like, I know there's someone in my life who would really, this would bring someone I care about a lot of joy. And so let me just like get this. And I think in both, there's this spaciousness within where you're at in your version of wealth, where you have capacity to actually, first of all, like see when someone is in need and have the capacity to show up for them and not have it stress you out. That feels like wealth. That feels like abundance.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. Like I want to be able to support my loved ones, but have it not stress me out and have it be, like with ease for the both of us. And like little things like, I have a ticket for you. Just come, fam, to
Yeah.
like, you're having a tough time. You're going through, becoming a parent, whatever it might be, and be like, let me offer this to you and like um have it not be like such a earthquake of a
Hmm.
situation. I
I
love,
mean,
yes.
that's the thing too, right? Like something that happens when folks get really clear about their numbers and like what money's coming in, what money's going out is like folks will then develop the skill also to say, hey, I can't afford that, but here's an alternative that I can't afford. And like, I would still love to hang out with you, right? I would still love to spend time with you. So, like, it's a specificity in asking for help, and also beginning to kind of break the stigma of like, well, we can't talk about money. It's like weird to talk about money, but
Hmm.
like, I can't tell you how many times I've been able to say like to a friend, I got $40, like, for this whole hangout that we're supposed to have. Like, how can we make the most of the $40, And this is something that my clients are finding they can do as well. And this is like one of the common things that I see. Um, a lot of people will say like, "Oh, I'm spending too much money on food and like takeout." Da, 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 da. So sometimes we spend a whole session just getting really clear on breaking food down into three categories, which is basically groceries, your Postmates, DoorDash, all that stuff, like almost like convenience eating, like decision fatigue type of eating, and then
Hmm.
like what is the actual like social, connecting with friends type of dining out, right? So we break that down, and they always have this feeling of like, well, I can't like afford to hang out with my friends anymore. I'm like, actually, you can if you just shift the like decision fatigue budget a little bit more towards social.
Hmm.
And yeah, it like really clarifies a lot of things, which is like I do have space to connect with people. Um,
Yes. Oh, I love this. And I appreciate the breakdown of like groceries, like decision fatigue buying of food versus like social. Like as someone who's neurodivergent, like I for a while there I didn't have capacity and still don't a lot of days to plan my own meals and cook for myself. Like that energy needed to go to a different part of my day to day. And so I was meal prepping. It just so happens I stopped, not meal prepping, but like buying those like pre-made meals. It just got to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, this shit has like no flavor. I can't eat this anymore. But it was important for me to be like feel comfortable with saying like, yeah, like I don't have capacity to buy groceries and make my own meals. This is something I need to budget for and prioritize as a part of meeting my accessibility needs. Um, like and not feel shame with that. And so like going back to your other example of like saying like, hey, I only got $40 for this, like I that is so important because I think we all have people in our lives who have different incomes, have different things that they're prioritizing with their money. And like that shouldn't prevent us from being able to hang out with them. Like we can hang out on $0 or we can hang out on 400. Like
exactly.
depending well like let's like meet and meet in the middle somewhere. Yeah. And like getting rid of that stigma of acknowledging what we have financial capacity to do, I think is important too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. Um, are any of the ways in which you like pair wealth with like community care and like support connected to how your blood or chosen family have historically shown up for each other or even ancestrally?
Um, I'm just gonna giggle. You know what? I'm doing this new thing. Like I realize that my brain is trained to like let's linger on the, you know, the bad stuff, the bad memories, the like harm that has been caused. And I'm trying to
Mm.
like retrain my brain to remember like, no, what were the good things that this person, that person, they brought into my life. Um, and something I really appreciate that I grew up witnessing. My mom is like the most social person I know. Like she always had like a ton of friends and I really admire the way that she like uh kept up with her friendships. Um so she used to when she would just have like cleaning on a Saturday or Thursday night or something or like a bunch of dishes or a bunch of laundry to fold and every time she would do that she would call a friend and just like hi, like yeah, what's going on with you? Like just checking in to say hi. Um that I really appreciate and is something I feel like I do now. And what's good about that is uh I think a lot of us, maybe through social media or through like the movies or something, like we have this conception that when you finally ask for help for something, it's like this dramatic thing and like, trumpets play and like whatever, right? And like someone has to come and like save you when you're in this like insanely like hard place. And to me, like this practice that I saw my mom doing, it's like a very like I'm checking in with you on a consistent basis so that if there was anything that we needed to bring up that's awkward, like, there's kind of this like, it's cool, I'll still call you tomorrow or like next week or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And I think her, my mom's thing is when the pandemic started, um, she and her siblings, they started to call each other every day. Like it's like one of her siblings lives in New York. My mom lives in New Jersey, and the rest of them live in the Philippines, right? So they would coordinate, they would get on FaceTime every day and they would pray the rosary. And they still do that now.
Mm.
Are they asking each other for help on their real problems? I don't know. But like, to me, it's something that I've applied, like the consistency of checking up on people so that when you do need help, it's not like this dramatic, like, oh my God, you gotta come bail me out. Like, like
Yeah.
where it's like I can sort of like, hey, I just need to talk through this thing, like, cool. And then like the week after that, it's like, oh yeah, like, do you have something you want to, you know what I mean? Like it's more
Yeah.
measured than like, okay, I'm like now I'm getting evicted, which is like people do go through that. I
Hmm.
think it's just hard when folks aren't communicating along the way, like, this is what I need to make rent and like keep my debts current so that, you
Hmm.
know, um, not to, I know that's a really tough experience not to like put anything else on folks' plate when they're going through that. But like, yeah, it's just something I think about, you know.
Yeah, like the only time hearing from someone is like when they're going through something um really heavy, and like if we had more, communication with this person, maybe we would have known before it went too far and could have supported sooner, or even just like set up the relationship so that it's not awkward talking about really hard shit. Yeah, absolutely. I'm, I've never seen a picture of your mom. Picturing like three women, I don't know how many, but like, yeah, like just getting together to like pray a rose. I don't know what that look like, but it's cute. It's giving.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Yeah, that was really sweet. Um, there in your story, it also reminds me of like going back to a previous response you had around um yeah, like paying for your friend's ticket, or like a friend like noticing you're having a hard day of Abundance for me, part of it is like having a life where it feels like I have enough space to actually think about people. Um,
Mm,
and I don't mean that in a dismissive way. Like I truly love all the like, my chosen family. But I also acknowledge that when we get busy, it's harder for us to check in with each other on the small
totally.
things. And so then it just feels like we go farther and farther apart simply because we're trying to like keep up with this like capitalist grind that we don't even want to be on in the first place. And so for me, abundant, I remember a time where I was working for myself and also like really intentionally spacious with my time. And I had so much more. I was like checking on folks more often. And they would be like, I have to go do this, this, that. I'm like, dang, like you seem hella busy. Like, I don't want that. But it's good to see you. And like now I'm working like back toward that. Like, how do I create that spaciousness again? Um, because I think that there's a like a wealth in that in itself of having like enough time to to just tap in with folks.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, about like even like small shit. It doesn't have to be just hey,
Hmm.
love you. Gonna drop by
Yeah.
at like some I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what I'd be dropping
I
by.
mean, I'll say this. I feel like like, some of my clients are like just the raddest people ever. Like, I've seen people, maybe it's like a partnered couple and they're like living alone and their expenses are really high and they decided, you know what, we're just gonna move into a different apartment with like two other friends, which is a little more non-traditional, right? But like over time, it's still that like we gotta stay tapped in so that we can figure out who we want to live with, if that is like a change that we want to make, right?
Hmm.
I have some clients who are also, this is really cool actually, like some folks that I've met, who are stewards of a susu fund.
Ooh, I love Susie. Okay, yes, continue.
Yeah, and for the listener out there, we'll just describe, a susu fund is like everyone puts in, a certain amount of money, and then, um, I think each month, on a regular basis, but then, um, depending on how many people are in there, like each month, somebody gets to take like a payout from the fund, right?
Hmm.
And then like whoever gets the payout, it kind of rotates. Or sometimes it depends on whoever like needs it the most in that moment, right? Um, but
Mm.
yeah, it's the idea of like a collective savings kind of a thing. I hope I'm describing that right, but
No.
this is my understanding of it, and
Hmm.
um, like things. I feel like we often romanticize like this is how, like, look at this amazing collective savings that this group of folks have built, but like that starts with like trust, like conversations that build trust, and um even actions that build trust, like, do you show up on time? Or like it's cool. Not everyone gets to, I mean, I understand CP time. Um like Filipino time, like too, I get it. But like even like, you know, do you pick up the phone when I call you, kind of thing? Do you answer?
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. It really adds up into like, can I trust you? And then based on that trust, can we build an economic system together that is like, you know, serves us a lot more than like these capitalist systems, little by little.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a whole word around like feeling so like stretched thin with your time that you're like showing up late and things and like yeah, CP time is a thing. I have my own thoughts about, but like for me personally, I will speak. Like I actually don't like the feeling of being rushed and having to go from one place to another or feeling like when I'm with people I care about, I can't fully be present because I'm so worried about trying to get to the next thing or other things are in my mind. It doesn't feel like what I like a life that I want to like a feeling that I want to have on a consistent basis. And I'm so excited you brought up Susu funds because yeah, like my understanding like so Susu funds are like traditionally like black like black folks like started that, but like a lot of cultures have their own versions of
Yeah.
these like uh Koreans have like kyungmae. Sorry, I'm like really Korean. Relearning Korean. Like, am I saying that right? But sorry if I'm butchering it. But it was like similar. And that was like how like Korean businesses and home ownership was able to happen in California like years back. So there's different versions of these, and I think it's really cool when like we start bringing these back and applying them and like reinventing them to what abundance might mean for us. Because maybe it doesn't mean like home ownership, or it might, but like home ownership or like having a business, with the like having a family with a white picket fence, but like creating like a collective house. Like what could it look like for that? So I appreciate that. So I'm gonna take us into a little break. And again, y'all, please do not skip over the next 60 seconds. These are dope ass organizations that I support and care about. So please give them a listen and we will meet you after the break.
I'm Marquesa Tucker Harris, Executive Director with the African American Roundtable in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Arts Vision is a joyful political home for Black people to thrive in liberated and interconnected communities. Our mission at the African American Roundtable is to organize, nurture, and transform Black leaders to build power in service of Black liberation. We get to do such amazing work here in the city of Milwaukee alongside residents. We'd love for you to learn more about our work. Visit us at aartmke.org.
All right, welcome back. So let's get back into more questions. It's so funny because there's no pause. Like, I'm gonna create the pause, but there's no pause in this conversation. Anyway, sorry, that's back end shit. Um, so we talked a bit about how rethinking wealth can help us strengthen our communities. But what are some ways that finances or other parts of wealth can be used to enact harm in our
Mm,
relationships?
yeah, yeah. I wanna ask you a question. A
Yeah.
situational question. Has there ever been a time where you've been like stressed about money and then, maybe like an hour later you have to go meet someone. You've just like opened your accounts and you're like, oh shit. And then like an hour later you're supposed to meet someone, but maybe you're not that close, and then that stress kind of bleeds into whatever like lunch you were having, right? Is that something that's ever happened to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think just overall, just like having that feeling like, oh my gosh, shit, I'm poor. Like I cannot. Where's the food gonna come from? All the things. Yeah, absolutely, definitely
Yeah,
bled into how I showed up.
totally. I mean, I hope like when folks listen to this, they're like, oh yeah, shit, that has happened to me too. But, especially in romantic relationships or platonic ones where like maybe you live with your roommate who you love very much. Um, yeah, I mean, this kind of thing just happens over and over and over again, like on
Mhm.
a more intimate scale than like someone random you're about to have lunch with, And I think that it snowballs in a way that people like don't even understand how they got there.
Mhm.
So for example, sometimes I work with couples where like it's their first time kind of showing each other like, here's what's going on under the hood, or like, here is how much I spend on massages every month, right? And they like, it's almost like that Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other like, whoa, like, and
Thanks for bringing
yeah,
Spider-Man into this.
yeah, just like realizing like, oh wow, like that's what's going on. But then before that, it was kind of like, okay, there's all this tension. We don't understand why, and it's kind of because folks don't understand how to have those conversations and have that transparency in those relationships where they can talk about things without like kind of projecting trauma along with like just the number of like, oh, well, this is what I spent on da 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 da.
Mhm.
It becomes like, well, you spent this on that, and meanwhile, I'm saving like it becomes like a really tense thing that happens, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Just like the feeling like uncomfortable or like resistance to sharing what's happening. Like as you said, under the hood, financially because it might change, like you think it might change the way like, your romantic partner or other like look at you. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This like this I guess this is before the relationship gets going. But honestly, I have always been, and this is probably off topic, but I've always struggled with like how to bring up paying for the meal when you're dating. Like, there's just I know it's tied to like
Mm.
some type of financial trauma there, and I'm still trying to work out like I want to be radical about this, but like I still am just like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you just offer to pay, like, because I don't know.
If I can, I can respond to that because, like,
Oh, yes, please.
you know, this is something I see. Like, um, let's say like you meet someone on an app or like you're texting, you're like figuring out the plan, right? Um, I think like, whoever, whenever the coffee shop or the or the restaurant or whatever gets put in the chat, um, I think it's more than okay to ask like, hey, so this is like I've been here. It's probably this much per person. Like, are you cool with that? And I think just asking what the price can open up like, okay, like what do we want to do, right? Like the
Oh,
other
the
person might be like,
conversation.
yeah, the other person might be like, oh, well, yeah, that's cool. And then if they're nice, they're probably like, I was hoping to buy you dinner. So
Oh,
if
well,
if they
fancy there.
suck, they'd be like, if they suck, they would be like, oh, why are we talking about this? You know what I mean? But like, and
That's a
then
nice invitation in.
yeah, I think
Mhm.
just acknowledging like, even like I'll make a joke too, like, oh, this says it's $2 signs on Yelp. Like, are you good with that? Like, you know,
Yeah. Are you a $2 sign person or a $4 sign person?
it depends
That's
on
your
the
new question.
date. Yeah, it just
Oh, that's
depends
a
on the
good
date,
point.
right? Because
I
if
am
it's a
not.
first date, I'm like, I'm not investing $4 signs. Like, I'm gonna find out first in the $2 sign range.
Oh,
Respectfully.
respectfully, I like. Okay, I'll be so honest because, like, if it's a cis man I'm going out with, they paying.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
on our principles alone, you're
Yeah,
paying.
exactly.
Anyone else we can have that
I'm like,
conversation with,
close the
like,
wage cap, babe. Close the wage
I
cap.
know exactly. Like, anyway, side conversation. That's a good point, and I think yeah, it just invites in the conversation around how folks kind of want to spend their money or like expect for like who pays
Yeah.
what to kind of go. And so I like that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
try that out when I have
I
my
mean,
next date in like two
yeah.
years.
But also, the second that, whoever drops like the restaurant suggestion in the chat, you got to check in with yourself and be like, okay, what do I want to do given that this is where they want to go, right? So, um, yeah, it kind of depends. Like maybe in the moment, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know, I'm feeling more generous. I really like chatting with this person. Like, cool, I like might want to pick up the tab. Then I would have to check in with myself and be like, okay, here's what it says on Yelp. And maybe the conversation can stop there depending on what you want to do, right? Maybe you don't got to talk about it because you already kind of know this is what I want to do when I get there. Some other times it's like, huh, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure about this person or if I'm ever going to see them again, like, whatever. So it is more appropriate to bring up, like, hey, it's this much. Like, is that okay with you? And they could say yes or no, or they could just bounce. I don't know, dating these days, you
Yeah.
know? And then depending on that, then you could say, like, yeah, I was hoping, like, we could go Dutch or like, and if this isn't like, you know, God, it's so weird to be like, if this isn't in your price range, or if this isn't where you want to eat, like we can go somewhere else, or we could like do a picnic or something that's like more affordable,
Yeah.
And then I would kind of close it up with like, yeah, I mean, I don't really care where we go. I just like want to get to know you.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah. Um, I do care where we go. No, I'm just I appreciate that because quite honest, like depending on like what you want from, this like romantic encounter or any like encounter, like you might not want to like like to be honest with you, like if it's a hookup, I'll be like I don't really want to drop $200 or maybe I do. Like let's go big or go home. And like hook up one night and man, we have a dope story. But for other folks, it's like I actually want to keep this like really chill and
Hmm.
but like, that goes into also like expressing upfront what your intentions are and making sure that the
Totally.
other folks like person or people are like consenting into what you're looking
Hmm.
for. So I feel that. Totally,
Yeah, for
totally get
sure.
that.
There's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of steps in between, like, hey, here's the price point. You know what I mean? Like, it would be weird if it's like we just matched on Tinder. Yo, what's your budget? That would be so weird. You know what I mean? But there's
Be that person though, like what? If it's yeah, I will need. Wait, yeah, anyway, let me not, let me not. I want to go back to the question around harm because I took um uh domestic violence training
Mm,
here in Colorado and one of the things they talked about is partners using finances as a way to control the relationship. So if like only one person has access to the finances and gets to pick and choose how much the other person or other people have in the relationship, how is that a means of like blocking the ability of that person to make decisions if they don't want to be in the relationship anymore? And it's something that like I think some like I had heard about before, but then I got me thinking about like so like this is something that I was never raised to like taught to like think about when like I was raised like the man will provide for you, like head of the household type of situation. And it got me thinking about like how do we need to be talking about finances before like getting in romantic relationships in order to set the tone of like leaving should always be an option, and I want to make sure that like both of us feel that that is there in case we choose to no longer be in this relationship, or if one of us like causes a great deal of harm or even a little bit of harm and like
mm,
the other one wants like the other people want to leave. And so I just wanted to like uplift that like there are like things that like folks can be doing, like looking at like if they have an IRA or something, there are like spousal IRAs that like a partner, if you're choosing to be a stay-at-home partner, like your other partner who is going to work can actually be paying into an IRA for you because like being a stay-at-home partner is still a job.
hmm.
Um, and things of that nature. So talking about like who is in control of the finances and making sure that there are safety rails or like safety guards for folks to have like financial agility to leave at some point, I feel like is just like really important to me now and something that wasn't um before. And I think you kind of shared this like in a previous conversation around like children and finances. I think that was something that came up,
Mm,
like making sure that folks had are considering children in the finances. Did you want to share more about that?
yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that, um, so like, uh, there's like a common piece of advice out there, depending on your algorithm, I don't know, common. But like they'll tell parents like, hey, you can actually put your kid down as an authorized user on your credit card, and then that kind of boosts their credit score down the line because um, like um they would have credit history and, just
Hmm.
proof that they've been like a responsible credit card holder for however many years. Like it's one of those like hacks that parents like to use, but I've also seen it happen where parents do that and then they spend that money under
Mm,
the kid's name and then it never gets resolved. And then the kid, like, you know, is gets into some deep shit down the line, like,
like
and
inherits
it's
debt that's
totally,
not
and it's
theirs.
it's
Yeah.
not their fault, right? And a lot of times too, when that happens, it's like, if you call your credit card company and you're like, wait, I'm not the one that made these transactions, like it was my parent, right? They'll probably tell you the only way that you can dispute this charge is if you sue them, you know?
Mm,
So this is like um kind of in line with some of the financial abuse that you were talking about that happens in interpersonal, like intimate relationships, right? And I want to shout out the work of this organization called Free From. They
mm,
actually support survivors of gender-based abuse. Um, yeah, to like help them bounce back, and they also have a lot of research of like what it actually takes, for folks to leave these kinds of partnerships. So I would recommend looking into that as well. They have like cash grants for survivors. They help survivors like rebuild financially, especially
mm,
like in terms of business, you know what I mean? Like starting their own
mm,
business. Like, so, yeah, I mean, um, uh, financial abuse it's no joke. Like, it's really painful. And I think, it's a really high statistic. I mean, I think I've heard something like 92% of all like domestic violence uh, cases have a financial abuse component to it. And it's also like what makes it hard, like really hard for people to leave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you
But
for
in terms of
uplifting that.
like, yeah, in terms of like conversations that folks need to have, like to set the tone in the beginning, similar to like the first date convo, there's usually like a bunch of other stuff that needs to be, like the foundation needs to be right before, the finance conversation happens, right? So like, I don't know, like if there's anything I can recommend, so to speak, for like uh folks who, want to avoid that because it's more of like a foundational thing, right? But to me, like if you're seeing some red flags of um I feel like the main red flag is like some hot and cold, like I'm down to pay for you, and like later they resent you for having paid for you when they're the ones that offered, right?
Hmm.
Um
Hmm.
like stuff like that, it's a big red flag. Or like yeah, like I think um oh, honestly, this day and age, I think not tipping is a red flag.
Oh my
Like
gosh, it's a red flag for just being an asshole.
exactly, right?
Tip
But
well,
anyway,
y'all.
there's a lot of like little signs here and there, right? But I feel like the second that you see something like that, I would just say like don't, if you can, like don't put yourself in a position where you're mixing finances right away,
Hmm.
because who knows, you know?
Yeah, yeah. feel that. We got so deep in dating. I was like,
Mm,
where did this come from? But anyway, so we cannot deny that in the US we are living in an environment with heightened threats to our safety on so many fronts. What are some of the ways we can incorporate financial preparedness into our safety plans? This can be with how we plan to escape or stay in the country, natural or human-made disaster planning, or plans we make when someone we are close to harms us.
mm, yeah. Um, Someone asked me recently, like, is there something you're saying over and over again, given like that's like a suggestion you're giving to everyone, given the times that we live in? And I will say, please, my loved ones, have at least $1,000 in your savings and like prioritize that over paying back any debt. Okay.
Yeah.
Ideally $1,000 in cash because if you need to like bounce and go somewhere, or if the power goes out in, in town or in the city that you live in, and um, folks aren't going to be able to process like credit cards and stuff, right? Like we're going to
Hmm.
need to have something to like buy things with. So, um, I would start with that for sure. Um, and then uh, you know, I understand that we're living in a time where the cost of living is so high, and there's not always a lot of extra at the end of the pay period, to get us through. And I would just say, um, saving and planning for disasters, like just, um, I know there's like yeah, I do this right now, but like I would really just encourage like habits over, the big wins and the big losses type of thing, right? Like
Mm.
even if it's like $5 a month, like it's something, like I really think it's about the consistency and not like how much you put in it all at once.
Hmm.
So yeah, even like I see people all the time like, oh yeah, I charged hundreds of dollars to my credit card because I was doing some, shopping for disaster planning and having my go bag ready. Like, cool. Yeah, I understand. And also, it's time to really like at the end of the day, if you really only have your backpack, do you need that? Can you carry that much stuff, first of all? Like let's really think it through versus just, panicking, right? I'm like, I know I
But
can't.
it's REI. It's gonna be terrible. Long lasting. Sorry, anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think also like thinking ahead, I mean, um I will just mention like by the time that we recorded this, the folks in Gaza have been, in a man-made famine for like 5 months now and starving. And then, this has been going on since October 2023, right? And I think of like the ways that, like the contraptions people are making to filter water. Like, I mean, you know, they didn't have to go to REI to like find the thing, right? So like if you get in the mindset of like, okay, shit is gonna go down eventually and I'm really gonna need my like ingenuity and like working with what's around, then I think have that energy also when you're putting together the go bag, right? Like, what do I already have in my house that can go in here? Who can I call when I'm missing something? I don't know, like a piece of rope or a carabiner or something. Come on, there's so many lesbians out there who will have the carabiner that you need. Like, you don't have to go buy one. You know what I mean? Like as much as it's like the stuff, it's also the mindset that we're going to be in, which is like make do with what you have, and like phone a friend, like
Hmm.
who are you going to call when you don't have a thing, right? So yeah.
Yeah, Absolutely. And yeah, this is not to diminish like what folks are experiencing in Gaza. It's an absolute genocide, and
Hmm.
I think it speaks to like the fact that they had to create all these like these things from like rubble, um, about like going back to the sense of um leaning into community and what's like already there, and it's simply not enough. It's simply not enough. But
Yeah,
when I think about myself and like how engine like in engine I was really scrappy as a poor kid. I was really scrappy because my mom was not buying me all the clothes I wanted. So I would be painting things and like creating the like skinny jeans out of bell bottoms because my like from the thrift store because my mom would refuse to buy me like skinny jeans. I was very inventive, and it cracks me up now how much I like don't use my ingenuity. Like I'm just like I'll go buy it. Like oh I'll just go buy. I was like you know how to fix this. Just like fix it. Um so I definitely hear what you're saying. Um and I guess to like close us out, can you give us a couple of people that you continue to learn from? And
Mm.
suggest we check out. Thanks for that drop of Freedom From. And then also, where can we find you? What's happening for you? Like any events coming up? Maybe they will have already passed by the
Mm.
time, but like still share.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see, who am I continuing to learn from? Oh, there's a poet that I really love. His name is Ross Gay. He actually shares a birthday with my grandma, which I think is really special.
Oh.
August 1st, Leos, rise up.
Don't tell all the Leos that. It's gonna be a whole last thing. Okay, I love me some Leos, but y'all be doing the most.
um, yeah, and he um he writes about joy. He has a book of poetry called The Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Um, Really lovely book. He also has a book where he like the Book of Delights. He wrote like a little mini essay about delight every day and like put it together in a book. And he kind of found like the more that you seek it out, the more that you're like, wow, things are delightful, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and I think and I think he does a really good job too of like the purpose of joy is not to like spiritually bypass like all the awful things that are happening in our world right now, you know, but that joy and sorrow actually go hand in hand, you know, and they can be experienced together. Um, so yeah, I've been reading a lot of his work lately to keep me on the up because it's dark times right now. Like it's wild times right now.
Mhm.
Um, so
Mm.
definitely would recommend him. Mm, yeah, and I continue to learn from the one and only James Baldwin up here.
I saw
Um,
that up there. I was like, oh,
yeah, this is
okay.
his biography, which was written by a friend of his who also like helped him like organize his, you know, notes and transcribe stuff and honestly I think helped him budget. So I'm like, okay, work. Spoiler alert, he was always, you know, I mean, artists like there's never enough really support for artists. So yeah, yeah, and then where to find me? I'm on Instagram at Queer and Trans Wealth. You can also check us out on Substack, queerandtranswealth.substack.com. Um, and yeah, on the site queerandtranswealth.org, if you're interested in our services.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Leo, again for being on the podcast. This has been a lovely conversation. So thank you. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I love you so much. I'm kissing consensually. If you want that, I will ask you before kissing you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I encourage you to meander on down to the description link below to share this episode, tip the guests, and follow all the magical folks that made this podcast possible. Deep gratitude to all of you. Even patting myself a little bit on the back right now. Labor of love, labor of love. Later, Gator, and may you walk with the ancestors. Peace out.
22,000 times a day. 22,000 times a day. 22,000 times a day. 22,000 times a day.